Only in business, Stanley. Off the job, I'm a real pussycat. Cleopatra Jones and the Casino of Gold is up next on Rediscovered Movies. Hello, welcome to a special live episode of Rediscovered Movies. I'm your host, Nomfanelo Malloy. So, the film that I will be discussing today is Cleopatra Jones and the Casino of Gold, which is a 1975 action film that is the sequel to the 1973 film Cleopatra Jones. So, this film is directed by Charles Bale, who's known for films such as Black Samson and Gumball Rally. The screenplay is written by Bill Tennant, who is known for the Hollywood Knights. The film is based on the characters by Max Julien. The film stars Tamara Dobson, Stella Stevens, and Tien. So here's the synopsis. When fellow operatives and childhood friends Matthew Johnson and Melvin Johnson disappear during an undercover mission in Hong Kong, Cleopatra Jones travels there to find them. With the help of local detective Mi Ling, Cleopatra discovers that her friend's disappearance has to do with the Dragon Lady, a much feared blonde lipstick lesbian who runs a Macau casino and controls a major chunk of the local drug trade. So the film was released in theaters on July 11th, 1975. I could not find any box office information, but the film has a $3.6 million budget. In terms of critical reception, there's no critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, but it has a 47% audience score. On IMDb, it has a 5.6 rating out of 10. At the time of this recording, it is available on demand, so check your local provider. All right, let's get into first discoveries. So, yeah, I remember like growing up, I had the VHS tape of this, and I would watch it occasionally. And I don't really remember my initial thoughts at the time, but I remember like it was a fun movie. And with this movie, because it's a sequel to Cleopatra Jones, I've seen this one many times over the first movie. And I say, in my opinion, it's better. This one is better than the first movie because this one is more of a spy action film, and clearly it has some influence from Asian martial arts. And this film was co-produced by the Shaw brothers. I think was credited as Run Run Shaw for this movie, so which is interesting because I would say the first film, in my opinion, is enjoyable but cartoony, particularly with the villain mommy. While with this movie, at least it tries to take itself too seriously. Yeah, there's some cheesiness here, like especially with some of the lines, but it's an enjoyable film. And if you have not seen the first Cleopatra Jones movie, it shouldn't be a problem while watching this movie. All you need to know is that essentially Cleopatra Jones is an agent that goes after drug dealers. And with Matthew and Melvin Johnson, she pretty much knew them like from the first movie, and they have a bigger role in this movie. So really, just outside of that, like you're all good to go with the sequel for this movie. So let's get into the highlights. So with this movie, it clearly has a James Bond influence because Cleo, she is an agent. She is an exotic location, so here it will be Hong Kong and Macau. She is essentially the lone wolf until Mi Ling saves her from the thugs during her search for Chen. So Mi Ling, you could consider her to be the Bond girl. The Dragon Lady, of course, as the villain, she is like Blofeld, since she has here, instead of Spectre, here she has the organization where she wants to essentially control the drug trade in China. And you could say with Stanley, he is M since he is Cleo's boss. And of course, there wouldn't be James Bond without theme music. And while here with this movie, we have the song Playing with Fire that's essentially played many times throughout this movie, not just with the opening and closing credits, but it's also played as an instrumental during some scenes in the movie. Well, it's not played like the exact same, but it has variations essentially of the same music. So another highlight for me is the performances from the cast. Tamara Dobson, she obviously did a great job as Cleopatra Jones, because at least here, we see her like very capable with the action scenes. Because if you have seen the first movie, like she is capable in that movie, but with the first movie, some of the choreography for that is a bit wonky. While like with here, like they actually had a stunt choreographer and all that stuff to make sure that the choreography is on point. And I would say with Tamara Dobson and Tien, so Tien, she's credited as Tanny in this movie. So they have great chemistry, because I love at times they love to banter back and forth at times. So particularly, there's a scene when they're going to Chen's place where essentially with Cleo, she tells Mi Ling to come from the roof. And they kind of have this whole and there's a reference to the Lone Ranger and Tonto. And then when Mi Ling rescues Cleopatra Jones, she pushes her off the roof of the casino, and she's like, "Oh, follow me, Tonto." So I thought that was cute, and like clearly, like they work out well together. Even though with Cleo, like she wants to work alone, but then once Mi Ling gets involved, that quickly goes away, and they manage to work out at the end. I enjoyed, yes, Stella Stevens as the Dragon Lady, because at least here as the villain, she's menacing. Because like with the villain from the first movie, she's fine, but but she's more of a cartoon character. So also to Norman Fell as Stanley. In ways, he is the comedic relief, but he's also able to scold Cleo like when she messes up at times. Because there's a moment, there's some couple moments. So when Cleo first arrives to the helicopter, Stanley's hat flies off into the water, and he looks upset when when Cleo arrives, which is hilarious. Yeah, so I like Stanley. Stanley's fun. Another highlight, yeah, is the music. So the composer is Dominic Frontier. Because with the music here, it kind of reminded me of music from Rush Hour, particularly with the composer for that movie, Lalo Schifrin. So it reminded me a lot of that with the instrumentation. Because I like how with the music, it's fun but cinematic, and then during like the serious moments, it's very tense. Because I would say one of my favorite scores from the movie is when Cleo walks alone to find Madalena, because that whole scene is intense, like when she's walking in the dark and trying to evade the Dragon Lady's henchmen. So that was cool too. And as I mentioned with Playing with Fire, like that's played like throughout the movie as theme music. Another highlight is the fashion, because I enjoyed with Cleo her wardrobe. It's very colorful and bright and tailored to with the suits and the hats. As with the first movie, she wears her hair like in an afro and wears a lot of fur and some tailored clothing there. While like with this movie, it's very bright, it's very noticeable. Because I kind of like questioned that in terms of wardrobe choice, like as an agent. But if we to go outside of that, she is very cool with those outfits. Because yeah, clearly they stand out. I guess to make her stand out from the crowd, but I don't get it as an agent why like wear clothes when you want to blend in, but it's neither here or there. And I would say like one of my favorite outfits that she wears is when she's at the hotel lobby talking to Stanley on the phone with the blue hat and the suit that she wears is cute. And also too with the final act when she's at the casino with Milene. That ensemble is cute. And with Milene, I liked her look too, like particularly with the hat when we first see her, the blue hat and the glasses on top of the hat is cute. I guess that's very 70s, but yeah, there's some good fashion choices in this movie. So another highlight. So with Cleo, like she clearly here is the foreigner in this movie since she's in another country, as opposed to the first movie when she is in her at her hometown. Because we see here like the locals, they do not want to talk to Cleo, like particularly when she's trying to catch a cab to look for Chen. And yeah, like I don't think racism plays a factor in it. I think she's just an outsider, and they probably don't trust people outside of the country. That's how I interpret it. Um, but yeah, that I found that was interesting too, and yeah, during like that whole sequence when she's at the flea market where she's set up by one of Chen's men, and then Milene saves her. That's interesting scene, very like engaging because yeah, we see her. She's capable of uh, handling her own, and but needs help, and Milene is there to save the day. So that was fun too, and yeah, like if yeah, I can't even speak right now. And like with Cleo as essentially an outsider is interesting for that moment. And lastly, the action scenes. They're very well choreographed. So the stunt coordinator is Eddie Dono, who also appears in this movie in the opening sequence as Morgan, the contact that meets with Matthew and Melvin in this movie. And also too is done by fight instructors Tang Chia and Yuan Xianyan for the scenes. Because in terms of scenes that I enjoyed is Mi Lin when she fights Mendez and his henchmen in her bathrobe tied up at her apartment. Because because even though she is limited with her movement, at least she gets the upper hand at times. The motor chase sequence when one of Milene's associates, David, chases Chen, that was engaging. Yeah, he kept falling throughout the chase, but manages to persevere at the end. And namely that I enjoyed is the last act at the Dragging Lady Casino with that whole sequence from when they storm in, like with all guns blazing. And then we see like Matthew and Melvin, fighting the henchmen from the roof, and Milene like against Mendez, and then finally Cleo with the dragging lady. So I enjoyed the action scenes like throughout this movie, but with those particular ones stood out to me. In terms of lowlights, let's talk about the dragging lady, particularly her outfit that she uses during battle. Because I thought it's an interesting choice. So essentially, she wears this black and fuchsia suit and pants with a headscarf and a black hat, which is an interesting choice, but oh well. And because there's a funny moment where during like the last act, like the outfit changes, she goes quickly. So she wears that when she meets Matthew and Melvin, and then cuts to the outfit she wears at the casino to see the women, Cleo and Mi Ling, at the casino, and then goes back to that outfit. I just thought that was hilarious because it was shown in a short span of time. So that was interesting. Also, too, let's talk about Matthew and Melvin. So, the I had like a question: are they supposed to be agents in this movie? Because it wasn't clear. Because in the first movie, like they help out Matthew and Melvin because I think they had their own dojo in the first movie. It's been a while since I've seen the first movie. And then here, I guess it seems to be implied that they're recruited to be agents. That part was not clear for me, even though what the synopsis says that they're operatives, but in the movie that could have been more clear. But it is, clear that they're not drug dealers. And I just wondered why they decided to cut the money in half. Like, I get like insurance, but wouldn't it be better if they just had half of the amount in the suitcase and then the other half when they complete the transaction? Because it's useless at the end of the day to cut the money in half, because how are they supposed to put it back together? Because when I saw that, it was just hilarious. And so with the Dragon Lady, when she finds out that Cleo and Mi Ling are also looking for Chen, she decides, oh, we need to eliminate them. But I just wondered, like, why not just use them as bait to get to Chen? That would have been a better alternative, but I guess at the end they're able to find Chen, so I guess it didn't matter, but it would have been preferable, if she uses them as bait to get to Chen faster. So, as I mentioned, the fight scene with Mi Ling in her bathrobe at her apartment is cool. But I just wondered, why did she leave her door open? Because I get that she wants Cleo to come in, but at the same time, you need to consider safety, since they know that, well, they don't know it's actually the Dragon Lady and her associates, but they know that they're being shot at town, because that has happened prior to that scene. So why? Because I find that as a pet peeve in movies, that they always leave the door open, like it's okay. It's just, why? I don't get that choice. And let's talk about Madalena. So Madalena, like when she's introduced, she's having this weird sensual massage scene with Dragon Lady. So I thought that whole scene was weird, but I get, like, we need to show like the Dragon Lady, I guess, in power, something like that. But the fact later on it's revealed that Madalena is the Dragon Lady's daughter, that just makes it weirder. Because yes, like if Madalena is adopted, but why did, she had to make out with her mother? That's just weird. I don't get that. And so clearly Madalena, she is upset with the Dragon Lady after, witnessing Chen's death, and I guess she doesn't like the Dragon Lady in general, question mark. So she decides to talk to Cleo and Mi Ling outside of the casino. And I just wondered, like, because with that place, there's eyes and ears everywhere, why not just, like, give them a note discreetly? Or she could have been more discreet with her actions? But whatever. And later, it's revealed that Mi Ling and her team are agents. And I'm just wondering, why couldn't they reveal that earlier in the movie? Because when Cleo first meets Mi Ling says, oh, we're private detectives. Which I'm like, okay, but because like we see like she has like this wall full of weapons, it's a bit excessive for someone as a private detective to have all those collection of weapons. So I think, yeah, the reveal of her as an agent could have been mentioned earlier in the movie. And then During the fight scene between Dragon Lady and Chen, so they're fighting in this arena that has this gate full of knives or swords. And I felt like the knives could have been longer because it looks as high as to be um, maybe to the waist. I think it could have been taller to make it harder for Chen to escape should he, felt the need to. And during the raid at the casino, when Cleo, Miling, and Co. they stormed the casino with their motorcycles and guns, some of the lines from the extras are very noticeable and hilarious. Because the one that stood out to me, where one person says, "Never mind about the money, worry about your ass." So I thought that was hilarious. And also, too, there was a shot, it looked like a woman with the breasts exposed, like the blouse out. I'm just like, what is going on here? That was just weird. And then a last note that I have for Lowlights is the music during the car chase sequence with Cleo and Meeling is hilarious. It just felt out of place instead of being suspenseful because the music kind of reminded me of either like a rodeo or I don't know, something you would hear from an amusement park. That just felt out of place. But other than that, the rest of the music in this movie is cool. So let's get on to trivia. So here are some fun facts. So I couldn't find a lot, but here's what I could gather. So Max Julian, who's the author of the source story for, and he was the co-producer of the first movie, he refused to participate in this one and instead got token credit for the story and script having been based on characters created by him, which is interesting. I don't know why he didn't want to participate in this movie. Maybe he felt like he told what he needed to told in the first movie and did not want to continue, or maybe did not have the best experience with the first movie. I don't know, or he probably just didn't want to. Who knows? So Tamara Dobson, she is credited. If you see the opening sequence, she did her own makeup for this movie, and I thought that was interesting choice because I don't know like if for the production they didn't have enough money for a makeup person or if she decided to do it on her own, but that was interesting choice. And it's also quite unusual that she is credited in the opening credits for doing her own makeup, but interesting. Stella Stevens, so she was chosen for the role of the Dragon Lady when the Hong Kong production company couldn't find a suitable Chinese actress that spoke fluent English. Interesting. And lastly, even though the Cleopatra Jones films were hits, star Tamara Dobson wasn't able to capitalize on them. The blaxploitation genre soon dried up, and she never became a huge star. They were her only leading roles, so that's very sad and unfortunate to hear about this. Okay, and lastly, I usually ask this question: should this movie be rediscovered? And I say absolutely yes, because it's an entertaining action film. This one clearly goes in a different direction than with the first movie. And I feel as though that with this movie influenced Rush Hour 2 with the casino sequences. I mean, that's my observation. I don't know for sure, but that's how I see it. The score by Dominic Frontier has a Lalo Schifrin feel to it because he's that composer, Lalo Schifrin. He's known for composing for projects such as the Rush Hour movies and the Mission Impossible TV series. And as I've said before, this movie, in my opinion, is better than the previous movie. So if you guys have not seen this movie, please check it out wherever it's available on your platforms. So, so this pretty much concludes this live episode of the podcast. So you could find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Linktree at Nomfanelo. You could find the podcast on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Linktree at RD Movies Pod. You could, on Spotify, answer the featured questions poll and rate the podcast. And on Apple Podcasts, you can leave a review and rate the podcast. You could submit questions, comments, or suggestions by email, which is rediscoveredmovies@gmail.com, or you could send a voice message on Spotify for podcasters/RD Movies Pod to be featured on the after show, which will air after the season finale. And all the links to the stuff will be available in the description. I want to say thank you guys so much for tuning in to this special episode of the podcast, and catch you on the next one.